What happens when one of Britain's most beloved comedians locks horns with a talk show panel in a clash that spirals completely out of control? In just 32 seconds, you'll witness the explosive moment that left everyone speechless. Make sure you subscribe to this channel for daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals. Last night on Loose Women, what started as a conversation about comedy and cancel culture turned into one of the most intense confrontations in British television history. Rowan Atkinson sat across from the panel, his usual calm presence replaced with something far more guarded. The makeup artist had barely finished with him before he was ushered onto the stage, and you could see in his eyes that he knew this wasn't going to be a friendly chat. Denise Welch led the discussion, and from the very first question, the atmosphere felt charged with an electricity that made everyone in the studio uncomfortable. The panel had clearly done their homework. Papers were shuffled, notes were glanced at, and there was a coordinated energy between them that suggested this had been planned out beforehand. Denise leaned forward with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, her hands clasped together on the desk in front of her, like a prosecutor about to begin cross-examination. "Rowan, welcome to the show," she began, her voice honey, sweet, but with an edge underneath. "You've been quite vocal about free speech lately, haven't you? Writing letters, giving interviews, really making your position known. Some might say you're defending comedy that punches down at vulnerable communities. How do you respond to that?" The audience murmured. Rowan shifted in his seat, and you could see his jaw tighten just slightly. He took a breath before responding, clearly measuring his words carefully. "I think that's a mischaracterization, Denise," he said, his voice controlled but firm. "I defend the right of comedians to explore difficult topics without fear of being destroyed professionally. There's a difference between defending speech and endorsing every joke ever made. That distinction seems to get lost in these discussions." Denise nodded slowly, but her expression suggested she wasn't buying it. "But surely you can see how that sounds to people who are on the receiving end of these so-called difficult topics, when you're defending the right to make jokes about their existence, their identity, their struggles." Rowan's eyes narrowed slightly. "I'm not defending jokes about anyone's existence. I'm defending the principle that comedy should be able to address any subject without the comedian being personally destroyed for attempting it. There's nuance here that you're glossing over." "But where's the line?" Denise pressed, her voice rising just a fraction, her hand gesturing toward him emphatically. "When jokes target marginalized groups, when they reinforce harmful stereotypes, when they make people feel unsafe in their own skin, isn't that just cruelty dressed up as comedy? Isn't that just bullying with a punchline?" "Who decides what's cruel?" Rowan countered, leaning forward now, matching her energy. "The mob on social media? A handful of activists who've appointed themselves as the moral arbiters of society? Comedy has always pushed boundaries. It's always made people uncomfortable. That's its function in society. That's how it examines power and challenges assumptions." Janet Street Porter jumped in from the side, her distinctive voice cutting through the tension. "But Rowan, times have changed. We know better now about the harm certain types of humor can cause. We understand trauma better. We understand marginalization better. Surely you're not suggesting we should just ignore all of that progress?" Rowan turned to face her, his expression hardening. "Do we know better, or have we simply become more afraid? There's a difference between evolving and cowering. There's a difference between being thoughtful and being paralyzed by fear of offense." The audience murmured, some nodding, others shaking their heads. You could feel the room dividing. Denise's jaw tightened, her lips pressing together in a thin line before she spoke again. "That's quite a statement," she said, her voice dropping lower, more intense. "Are you saying people who object to offensive comedy are cowards? Are you saying that people who've been hurt by these jokes are just too sensitive?" "I'm saying," Rowan said, his voice dropping to match hers, creating an intimate intensity that somehow felt more dangerous than shouting, "that we've created an environment where fear dictates what can and cannot be said, where people self-censor not because they think they're wrong, but because they're terrified of the consequences. And that's dangerous for everyone, not just comedians." Denise shook her head, her frustration becoming more visible with every passing second. Her cheeks were flushing pink. "This is exactly the problem. This right here is the problem. You sit in your position of privilege. in your comfortable life, and talk about fear while people from marginalized communities actually experience real harm from the kind of comedy you're defending. Real, tangible harm. Privilege, Rowan repeated, letting the word hang in the air like an accusation. That's always the card played when someone doesn't want to engage with an actual argument, isn't it? Attack the person's background, their identity, their circumstances. My privilege doesn't make my points invalid, Denise. It doesn't mean I can't think clearly about these issues. The panel exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Nadia Sawala tried to interject, her voice gentle, trying to calm the rising temperature in the room. I think what Denise is trying to say is that impact matters more than intent sometimes. That even if you don't mean to hurt someone, if they're hurt, that matters. Rowan didn't break eye contact with Denise. His gaze locked on hers like two fighters in a ring. And I'm saying that if we only measure comedy by who might be offended, if we only judge it by its potential to hurt feelings, comedy dies, satire dies, social commentary dies. And with it, one of the most important tools we have for examining society, for challenging power, for speaking truth. Denise's voice grew sharper, cutting through his words. So, the feelings of minorities don't matter? Their trauma doesn't matter? The fact that jokes about them have been used for centuries to dehumanize them, that doesn't matter to you? That's not what I said. Rowan shot back, his composure starting to crack, his voice rising despite his obvious efforts to control it. And frankly, I'm tired of having my words twisted into positions I don't hold. This is what happens in these conversations every single time. Nuance dies and we're left with straw men. You're not arguing with me. You're arguing with some cartoon version of me that you've created. Strawman? Denise's voice went up an octave, her professional veneer slipping completely now. You're literally sitting here defending the right to mock vulnerable people, and you're talking to me about straw men? You're defending jokes that cause genuine psychological harm to real human beings. I'm defending the right to free expression, Rowan said, his voice rising to match hers, the careful politician tone gone now, replaced with raw emotion. Even expression you or I might find distasteful. Even expression that makes us uncomfortable. Because the alternative, the world where we police every word, every joke, every thought, that's worse. That's so much worse. Denise laughed, but there was no humor in it. It was harsh and bitter. The alternative to racist jokes is worse. The alternative to transphobic comedy is worse. Really? That's what you're going with? That's your hill to die on? Don't put words in my mouth, Rowan warned, his finger pointing across the table now, trembling slightly with anger. I never said anything about defending racist jokes specifically. I never said anything about defending transphobia. You're doing exactly what I just accused you of. You're creating a straw man and attacking it. The studio went quiet for a moment, the silence heavy and oppressive. The tension was suffocating, like the air had been sucked out of the room. Kay Adams attempted to mediate, her voice nervous, uncertain. Perhaps we can all take a breath and step back for a moment. We're all getting very heated here and... No, Denise cut her off sharply, not even looking at her, her eyes fixed on Rowan like a laser. I want to understand this. I genuinely want to understand. You keep talking about free speech, but you seem more concerned about protecting comedians than about the people their jokes harm. You seem more worried about the feelings of the people making the jokes than the people crying themselves to sleep because they're the punchline. Why is that? Rowan's face flushed red, a vein visible on his temple now. Because comedy is how we process difficult truths. It's how we examine power structures, including the very ones you claim to care about so much. When you start policing it, when you start deciding what can and cannot be joked about, you don't just lose jokes. You lose an entire mechanism for social commentary. You lose the ability to challenge authority through humor. Social commentary, Denise repeated mockingly, her voice dripping with contempt. Is that what we're calling it when someone makes a joke about trans people? Or immigrants? Or disabled people? Social commentary? That's the phrase we're using? It depends on the joke, Rowan said through gritted teeth, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair so hard, his knuckles were white. Context matters. Intent matters. The target matters. But you've already decided none of that matters, haven't you? You've already decided I'm the enemy. You've already decided that anyone who doesn't agree with your exact worldview is a bigot. You're making yourself the enemy, Denise fired back, her voice shaking slightly with rage. You're sitting here, on national television, defending the indefensible and acting like you're some kind of martyr for free speech. Like you're some brave warrior standing up against tyranny when all you're really doing is defending people's right to be cruel. Rowan's voice went dangerously quiet. The kind of quiet that's more frightening than shouting. I've spent my career making people laugh. Decades of bringing joy to millions of people. And now, I'm being lectured by someone who seems to find offense in everything because it's easier than engaging with complex ideas. It's easier to be outraged than to think. The panel gasped audibly. Someone in the audience made a noise of shock. Denise stood up slightly from her seat, her whole body rigid, her face red with fury. How dare you? How bloody dare you come onto this show and insult me like that? Who the hell do you think you are? You've been insulting me since I sat down, Rowan countered, also rising from his chair now, both of them standing, facing each other across the desk like duelists. Every question loaded, every response twisted, every word I say taken in the worst possible light. This wasn't a conversation. This was an ambush. This was a trial, and you were the judge, jury, and executioner. An ambush? Denise's voice cracked with anger, her hands gesturing wildly now. You agreed to come here and discuss your controversial views. You knew what this show was. You knew we weren't going to just nod along and agree with everything you said. Did you expect us to just sit here and let you spout your nonsense unchallenged? I expected a discussion, Rowan said coldly, his voice like ice now. Not a trial, but that's what this is, isn't it? You've already found me guilty. This is just the sentencing. This is just you making an example of me for anyone else who might dare to disagree with the accepted narrative. Janet tried to jump in, her voice rising to be heard over the confrontation. Rowan, I think you're being unfair. We're just trying to understand your position. We're trying to what? Rowan spun toward her, his movement sharp and aggressive. To educate me? To put me in my place? To teach me the error of my ways? I understand perfectly well what this is. I've seen it happen to dozens of people. This is how it works now. Someone steps out of line, and they're brought on shows like this to be humiliated publicly. Denise's voice cut through like a knife through butter. If you don't like the questions, if you don't like being challenged, perhaps you should reconsider the positions you take publicly. You don't get to spout controversial opinions and then play victim when you're called out on them. You don't get to defend harmful comedy and then cry about being treated unfairly. Challenged? Rowan laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and jarring. Is that what you call this? You're not challenging me, Denise. You're trying to humiliate me. You're trying to make me look like a monster. There's a difference between intellectual challenge and character assassination. The audience was completely silent now, watching the confrontation unfold with wide eyes and dropped jaws. Some had their hands over their mouths. Others were leaning forward in their seats. The camera zoomed in, capturing every moment of the breakdown. Nadia attempted once more to calm things down, her voice almost pleading. Maybe we should take a quick break and come back when everyone's calmed down a bit. We could... No break, Denise said firmly, her voice leaving no room for argument, her eyes locked on Rowan. I want an answer. A real answer. Do you or do you not believe that some forms of comedy cause genuine harm to vulnerable communities? Yes or no? Rowan stared back at her, his chest heaving with angry breaths. I believe that the subjective experience of harm cannot be the sole arbiter of what's permissible in a free society. Because if it is, if someone merely claiming harm is enough to shut down expression, then anyone can shut down anything by claiming harm. Any idea, any joke, any opinion can be eliminated by finding someone who says it hurts them. Subjective experience of harm, Denise repeated, her voice dripping with disdain and disgust. Listen to yourself. Listen to the words coming out of your mouth. People aren't making this up, Rowan. The harm is real. The pain is real. The trauma is real. But you're sitting here talking about it like it's some abstract philosophical concept. And who validates that harm? Rowan demanded, his voice rising again, his control slipping further. You? The loudest voices on Twitter? This panel? A committee somewhere? Where does it end, Denise? Where does it stop? Who gets to be the ultimate judge of what's harmful and what's not? It ends when people stop being cruel, Denise shouted, slamming her hand on the desk hard enough to make the coffee mugs jump. It ends when we decide that making people laugh isn't worth making others feel like shit. It ends when we value human dignity over cheap jokes. The profanity hung in the air like smoke. The studio seemed to hold its breath. Rowan's expression darkened, his face a mask of anger and frustration. So we police all expression based on the most sensitive interpretation? We create a world where everyone walks on eggshells, terrified to say anything that might offend anyone? Where comedy has to be approved by sensitivity committees? Where every joke has to pass through a filter of political correctness? If the alternative is the world you're defending, then yes, Denise shot back, her voice cracking with emotion. Absolutely yes. If the choice is between your precious free-for-all comedy and a world where people feel safe and respected, I choose the latter every single time. Rowan shook his head slowly, deliberately, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Then we have nothing more to discuss. Because you're advocating for exactly the kind of authoritarian thinking that every comedian, every artist, every writer, every free person should oppose with every fiber of their being. Authoritarian? Denise's voice went shrill, almost breaking. Asking people to have basic human decency is authoritarian now? Wanting people to think before they speak is authoritarian? Suggesting that maybe we shouldn't make jokes at the expense of people who are already suffering is authoritarian? When it's enforced through social destruction and professional ruin, yes, Rowan said quietly, but with steel in his voice, each word deliberate and cutting. When people lose their livelihoods for making jokes, when their careers are destroyed, when they're hounded off social media, when they receive death threats, yes, that's authoritarianism, dressed in compassion. That's tyranny, wrapped in kindness. Denise's face was scarlet now, her chest heaving. You know what? I've had enough of this. I've had enough of your pseudo-intellectual bullshit. You come on this show with your high-minded rhetoric about free speech, but what you're really defending is your right to be an arsehole without consequences. That's what this is really about. And there it is, Rowan said, a grim smile crossing his face. The mask drops. When you can't win the argument, when you can't defeat the logic, you resort to personal attacks. You resort to name-calling. Because that's all you have left. I'm not attacking you personally, Denise hissed, leaning forward across the desk. I'm attacking your ideas, which frankly are outdated, privileged, dangerous, and harmful to the very fabric of a decent society. Dangerous, Rowan repeated, his voice hollow now, almost disbelieving. Ideas are dangerous. Not violence, not actual oppression, not real harm, but ideas, words, jokes. Do you hear yourself? Do you understand what you're saying? Kay Adams made one final attempt. Let's everyone just calm down. We're all getting a bit heated here. Calm down, Denise whirled on her. He's sitting here defending comedy that hurts people, and I'm supposed to calm down? Rowan stood up fully now, his microphone still clipped to his jacket. I came here to have a conversation. A real conversation about something I care deeply about. But this isn't a conversation. This is a kangaroo court. Then leave, Denise said coldly. If you can't handle being challenged on your views, leave. Rowan stared at her for a long moment. The studio was so quiet, you could hear the cameras adjusting focus. You know what the saddest part of this is? He said finally. You think you're on the side of good. You think you're protecting people. But what you're actually doing is making it impossible to have difficult conversations. You're shutting down discourse. And that helps no one. Save your speech, Denise said dismissively. If you're going to leave, leave. Rowan's jaw clenched. He reached down and unclipped his microphone, the sound echoing through the studio speakers. I've worked in this industry for decades. I've seen trends come and go. But this current obsession with offense, this need to destroy anyone who steps out of line, it won't end well. It never does. Are you seriously comparing asking for human decency to some kind of dystopia? Janet asked, her voice incredulous. Rowan turned to her. I'm saying that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And right now, we're sprinting down that road while patting ourselves on the back for being so virtuous. Denise stood up completely now, facing him across the desk. "Get off my show. I mean it. Get off my show." "Your show?" Rowan raised an eyebrow. "I wasn't aware you owned it, Denise, but I suppose that's fitting. You do seem to think you own the moral high ground as well." "That's it," Denise said, her voice shaking with rage. "Security. Get him out of here." The other panelists looked shocked. Nadia put her hand on Denise's arm. "Denise, come on, let's not." Denise shook her off. "No, he's been disrespectful, he's been insulting, and I'm done. Get him off the stage." Rowan held up his hands. "No need for security. I'm leaving. I wouldn't want to contaminate your safe space with my dangerous ideas any longer." "Spare me the sarcasm," Denise spat. Rowan set his microphone down on the chair with deliberate care. He looked at each panelist in turn, then back to Denise. "You know what you've done here today? You've proven my point better than I ever could have. You've shown exactly what happens when someone dares to disagree with the accepted narrative. They're shouted down, insulted, and expelled. Congratulations." "Oh, piss off with your victim complex," Denise said harshly. "You're not being persecuted. You're being held accountable." "Accountable for what?" Rowan demanded, his voice rising one final time. "For having a different opinion? For believing that free expression matters? For suggesting that maybe, just maybe, we've gone too far in the other direction? For defending bigotry?" Denise shouted. "That's what you're being held accountable for." Rowan's face went pale. "I have never defended bigotry. I have defended the principle of free speech. If you can't see the difference, that's on you, not me." "The principle of free speech?" Denise mocked. "Do you know how many times I've heard that excuse from people who just want to say horrible things without consequences?" Rowan's voice went very quiet again, more dangerous than when he was shouting. "And do you know how many times I've seen good people destroyed by mobs who claim to care about harm while inflicting it themselves? This right here, what you're doing, this is how it starts." "How? What starts?" Denise demanded. "Totalitarianism," Rowan said simply. "It always starts with the best intentions. It always starts with protecting people from harm. And it always ends with everyone terrified to speak their minds." Denise threw her hands up. "Oh my God, you're actually comparing me to a totalitarian now? Are you hearing this?" She looked at the audience, then back at Rowan. "You're completely out of your mind." "Maybe I am," Rowan said, backing away from the seating area. "Or maybe I'm the only one here willing to say what I actually think instead of what I'm supposed to think. Either way, I'm done." "Good," Denise said, crossing her arms. "Don't let the door hit you on the way out." Rowan paused at the edge of the stage. "You think you've won something here today. You think you've struck a blow for decency or kindness or whatever you're calling it. But all you've done is make it a little bit harder for anyone to have an honest conversation about anything that matters. Save it for your next interview, where you complain about being canceled." Denise shot back. "I'm sure the Daily Mail will be very sympathetic." Rowan's face twisted into something between a smile and a grimace. "And there's the tell. You can't even help yourself. Even now, you're trying to discredit me by association, because that's all you have. You can't defeat the argument, so you attack the person. The argument is defeated by its own absurdity," Denise said coldly. "Now get off my stage before I have you removed." Rowan looked at her one last time. "History won't remember which side of this you were on as the right one, Denise. But it will remember that there were people who tried to control what others could say and think. It always does." "Off!" Denise pointed toward the exit. "Now." Rowan turned and walked toward the side of the stage. The cameras followed him as he moved past stunned crew members. His footsteps echoed in the silent studio. He didn't look back. He didn't wave. He just walked, his spine straight, his head high. Behind him, Denise remained standing, her chest heaving with emotion. The other panelists sat frozen, unsure what to do or say. The audience didn't make a sound. Rowan reached the edge of the stage area and disappeared into the wings. The heavy door closed behind him with a definitive thud that seemed to echo through the entire studio. And just like that, one of the most explosive confrontations in British talk show history was over, leaving everyone to process what they had just witnessed.